Hi, it's Katrina. The Holy Grail. Hanging on the walls of the Santa Maria della Grazia in Milan is a painting called The Last Supper, a truly monumental piece of work finished by Leonardo da Vinci in 1498. The painting shows the very Last Supper Jesus had with his 12 disciples, or 12 apostles. This scene is a snapshot of the reaction at the table moments after Jesus announces somebody will betray him before sunrise. But it's not only the religious nature of the painting that made it famous, it was the way Leonardo mastered perspective, motion, and human emotion that made it such an instant hit centuries ago. These days, The Last Supper has more conspiracy theories attached to it than any other piece of artwork. Leonardo himself has more secrets in his art than most other high Renaissance artists. Some believe The Last Supper contains a coded message explaining the whereabouts of the mysterious Holy Grail. You probably already know this, but it was the very chalice Jesus drank from during the Last Supper, and then the same chalice used to collect his blood during the crucifixion by Joseph of Arimathea. Leonardo was supposedly a member of the highly secret organization called the Priory of Sion, and he allegedly had information about the location of the Grail. And while he couldn't verbally tell anyone, he could leave a coded message in his artworks to point eagle-eyed observers in the right direction. Although, to be fair, nobody has ever found the supposed coded message in the painting. We don't know if such a message even truly exists. The mystery of the orb. Salvator Mundi is a painting that has been attributed to Leonardo da Vinci, created between 1499 and 1510. The painting depicts Jesus Christ wearing a blue Renaissance dress, making the sign of the cross with one hand and holding a see-through crystal orb in his other hand. The orb is supposed to be a representation of the world, the celestial sphere of the heavens and the earth. It signifies Christ's role as the savior of the world. But this painting, while truly a masterpiece, has been one of the most controversial of all of Leonardo's works in the last few years. For starters, nobody is entirely sure if it was Leonardo alone who created the oil painting. It may have been from a workshop or a pupil of Leonardo da Vinci. This painting has a long and complicated history, and right now, no one even knows where it is. After missing in Europe for almost 200 years, it surfaced in the UK in 1900. Then, in 2005, it appeared in terrible condition in the United States. It was a long road to see if the painting was authentic. After much painstaking research, it was put on exhibition at the National Gallery in London in 2011. Then, in 2017, it was sold for $450 million and disappeared. Now it is somewhere in Saudi Arabia, hidden away by order of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the same bin Salman whom the CIA found responsible for ordering the murder of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The question in the art world is, where is he hiding it, and why? Recently, computer scientists from the University of California created a virtual copy of the painting. These scientists believe that with this virtual copy, they have solved the mystery of who really painted Salvator Mundi. The biggest issue is that the orb in Christ's hand doesn't refract light in a realistic way. Seeing as Leonardo was huge on science and always went with realism in his paintings, it seems strange that he chose to ignore it in this instance. However, using sophisticated computer tools to simulate light, researchers have found that the orb was most likely hollow. If Leonardo imagined the orb as being hollow and built from rock crystal, it wouldn't refract light at all, but would be completely translucent, just like it is in the painting. The Secret Baby. There are rumors that in the painting of the Last Supper, Mary Magdalene is the individual sitting to the right of Jesus. There is also a rumor that 2 seats over is a disguised baby. Taking these theories to an even crazier level, some say that Mary Magdalene fits like a puzzle piece on Jesus' shoulder, as if she were resting her head on his shoulder for comfort. It's also said that the baby fits right between them. This would suggest that Jesus and Mary Magdalene had conceived a child in secret before the crucifixion. Or at least that would be the suggestion if Leonardo had really drawn the Last Supper with Mary Magdalene and a secret baby in mind. So, what's the truth behind the rumor? The figure on Jesus' right side is John the Apostle, not Mary Magdalene. The rumor comes from the fact that John looks an awful lot like a woman in the painting. but that was just the way Leonardo drew men sometimes, with effeminate long and sultry hair and delicate features. If Leonardo had really drawn Mary Magdalene into the picture, he could have been charged with heresy and either hanged or locked up for the rest of his life. The other Lisa. French scientist Pascal Cotte studied the painting of the Mona Lisa for 10 long years. He was eager to get to the bottom of the mysterious painting and the mysterious woman in it. First of all, the woman in the picture is not named Mona Lisa. Mona is almost certainly supposed to be a contraction for Madonna, giving her some connection to the Virgin Mary. Most historians agree Leonardo used a woman named Lisa Gherardini, a middle-class woman from Florence in the 16th century, as his model. He was, seemingly, trying to transform Lisa into his own enigmatic version of the Madonna. But here's what Pascal found underneath the painting. After 10 years of scrutiny, he uncovered a different face underneath the original artwork. If his discovery is proved legitimate, it's going to flip the world of art on its head. And so far, it's looking like it's true. Art historian Andrew Graham Dixon has corroborated the outrageous claim, saying the original woman underneath the painting was certainly not Lisa Gherardini. It was a totally different woman with a completely different face. The original woman had a much slimmer face, vastly different eyes, less hair, a more revealing garment showing quite a bit of skin, and the most shocking thing of all, she was smiling. Nobody knows what Leonardo did here. It appears that he painted a woman, decided he didn't like it, and then transformed her into Lisa Gherardini through the magic of his oil paints. Doomsday Message. An outrageous claim has been made that in the painting of The Last Supper, Leonardo da Vinci left a secret message regarding the end of the world. Leonardo supposedly took extreme care to highlight the importance of the number 3. There are 3 windows, and there are 4 groups of 3 apostles. According to Vatican researcher Sabrina Sforza Galizia, these numbers pertain to a secret prediction of a global flood that will occur on March 21st, the year 4006. Sabrina claimed that by studying the half-moon window above the figure of Christ, adding in the collection of 3s, and doing some insane mathematical gymnastics, she came up with the date for the destruction of humanity. Sabrina also believes that Leonardo had been given a vision of the end of days, and that it's going to happen 2,000 years from now. Adoration of the Magi. For 5 long centuries, images underneath the Adoration of the Magi, one of Da Vinci's earlier works, remained hidden. Art researcher Maurizio Serracini used infrared photography technology to uncover previously invisible details, some of which have conspiracy theorists very excited. Out of all of Leonardo's paintings, Adoration of the Magi is one of the busiest. There is a lot going on in the picture, from figures to faces, buildings, plants and foliage in the background, and even beasts. There is enough going on that with a bit of a creative imagination, you can pick up all kinds of clues and interpret them just about any way you want. The truth of the painting is that it's supposed to be a depiction of the 3 kings visiting the Virgin Mary and the newborn Jesus. The big difference here is that there is no manger, there is no stable, there isn't even a donkey. Instead, we see a hill with a tree swarmed by ghoulish faces and men crawling about on their hands and knees. We also see a horseman in the distance and what looks to be a ruined structure. The painting is odd, there's no getting around it, but with the newly discovered traces underneath the finished painting, things make a little more sense. Leonardo clearly hadn't figured out what he wanted to do with it. It was originally a full-blown battle scene, men on horseback murdering one another with steel weapons. The buildings were also characteristic of ancient Egypt. Leonardo da Vinci had created a nativity scene unlike any other, with the Virgin Mary and Jesus at the center of a battle in ancient Egypt. Nobody has any idea why, or what he was thinking. The Virgin of the Rocks. The Virgin of the Rocks is a truly magnificent piece of art created by Leonardo da Vinci 500 years ago. Researchers from Imperial College London used X-ray scanning and a totally new algorithm to uncover hidden figures underneath one of da Vinci's most famous paintings. This was what art historians call a visual excavation. They discovered partial drawings underneath the finished piece using infrared imaging. First, let's look at a bit of background. The Virgin of the Rocks was commissioned in 1483 as an altarpiece to stand in a chapel devoted to the Immaculate Conception of the Virgin Mary. There were two large sculptures of angels standing alongside the Virgin, with Leonardo's painting placed directly underneath the sculpture. There are two versions of the same painting still around today. The first was the original, and it's hanging at the Louvre Museum. The second version at the National Gallery in London was also completed by Leonardo. It shows the same scene, but it has slightly different hues and a more somber tone. Both paintings are over 6 feet tall and were originally painted on wood panels. The hidden sketches underneath the London version show a totally different version of the painting. We see the Virgin standing with a different posture, as well as a lot of winged angels crooning over the baby Jesus. It looks like for the second version of the same painting, Leonardo had considered going in a different direction. Was Leonardo da Vinci dyslexic? It's been over 500 years since Leonardo da Vinci died. To this day, he is considered one of the greatest inventors and genius artists in human history. But according to researcher Dr. Salvatore Mangione from Thomas Jefferson University, Leonardo gained his artistic abilities through dyslexia. Roughly 20% of people on Earth suffer from dyslexia. Contrary to popular belief, dyslexia does not affect intelligence. It affects reading, writing, and spelling. But recent scientific studies have shown that people who have dyslexia are more creative than those who don't. Not everyone in every instance, but it is fairly common for those with dyslexia to be extraordinarily creative. Thanks to all the recorded history of Leonardo, we know he didn't do well in school. He was bad at spelling. He had at least 9 different ways that he would write a single word, and he just couldn't seem to get letters right. Researchers think he was almost definitely dyslexic, and this helped fuel his creative genius. The Annunciation. The Annunciation was completed by Leonardo da Vinci in 1476. The painting shows the Virgin Mary being visited by Archangel Gabriel. As you may have come to learn by now, just about every single one of Leonardo's greatest works of art had something to do with the Virgin Mary. In this case, she's sitting in a garden outside a Renaissance palace when Gabriel appears to tell Mary she will soon bear a son, and that he will be the Son of God. The Annunciation was a favorite biblical event among early Renaissance artists. Each small detail in the painting has to do with the story. For example, the garden is clearly in bloom, suggesting springtime. People in the 15th century believed the Annunciation was the exact time when God impregnated the Virgin Mary, 9 months before the winter nativity scenes. The final secret in the painting is a single ray of light illuminating Mary's face as it touches her raised hand. That tiny, almost invisible detail is the most important in the entire painting. The ray of light is supposed to be the Holy Spirit itself touching Mary's flesh. It represents the very second that Jesus Christ is brought into the world. The musical code. Giovanni Maria Pala, an Italian musician and computer technician, recently discovered a secret message in Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper. Unlike a lot of crazy theories surrounding the famous painting, this message is very real. Giovanni discovered musical notes encoded in the painting, leading to speculation that the Renaissance artist may have left behind a composition inside the scene. Giovanni says it sounds like a requiem. He discovered musical notes by drawing lines between elements in the painting that have Christian value. For example, the loaves of bread on the table, the hands of Jesus, and each apostle. Each important element is its own musical note. The most confusing part was that the musical notes couldn't be read traditionally, going left to right, but had to be inverted and played backwards. This was because of Leonardo's unusual writing style, perhaps a result of his dyslexia. In the end, Giovanni cracked the code and identified a hymn to God. He put together a 40-second-long composition that Leonardo appears to have hidden in The Last Supper. It's slow, and the composition is best played on the organ, but all the musical notes do fit and make sense. Leonardo expert Alessandro Vezzosi believes Giovanni may be the first person ever to have really cracked a secret code in The Last Supper, although what that composition means, or what Leonardo's intention was behind the secret musical notes, is still a mystery. The brilliant Indian sages. Ancient India was one of the most scientifically advanced places on Earth. It's a land of myth and legend, but also of supreme knowledge. Ancient Indians knew about genetics, performed plastic surgery, and even completed complex brain surgery. And they may have had knowledge of visitors from other worlds. If we look at the ancient Sanskrit texts from India, we see a lot of bizarre things happening. In texts like the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, and the Yajurveda, there is discussed something called a Vimana. In the Mahabharata, a hero named Arjuna sees an incredible ship flying through the sky. The ship lands softly on the ground and is covered in wonderful flashing lights. The vessel has a smooth metallic body, and when the hero approaches, a door opens on the vehicle's side and a flight of stairs flows down as if by magic. This sounds an awful lot like a flying saucer, or at least a modern aircraft. And yet these contraptions are discussed in Sanskrit texts from thousands of years ago. Other records even talk about something that sounds a lot like a nuclear weapon. The Indian gods were said to possess a weapon called Pasupata, which was forbidden to launch against the planet because it would obliterate it entirely. Some have speculated the ancient Indians did indeed make contact with advanced life forms from another planet. These other beings then bestowed upon them knowledge of genetics, math, surgery, and so much more. But because the Indians didn't understand the interplanetary connection, they turned the aliens into their gods and wrote stories about them. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Beehive houses. Thousands of years ago, humans started molding Earth into dwellings in the shape of beehives. It's not clear where it started, only that evidence of the practice has been found in Turkey as far back as 3700 BC. The idea caught on, spreading into neighboring Cyprus, Armenia, Greece, you name it. Beehive-shaped structures have been found as far away as Ireland. But what is a beehive house, and why did ancient people start building them? The house looks exactly how it sounds. It's a conical dwelling like a giant beehive with a hearth, some beds, and enough storage for personal belongings inside. The beehive house was such a great idea that they are still used to this very day in villages in Syria. There are still people who live in traditional beehive homes just like their ancestors did over 5,000 years ago. In these places, almost nothing has changed since prehistoric times. The reason such homes were built in the first place was mainly a lack of available building supplies. There wasn't a lot of material lying around in the Syrian desert. Plus, they had to deal with earthquakes, extreme heat, and raging winds. So the ancient people looked to nature for inspiration. They may not have been able to work with metal, and they didn't have their own written language, but they were knowledgeable enough to understand that Mother Nature makes things for a reason. By copying the design of the beehive, the desert dwellers made their houses able to resist the mechanical stress of wind pressure. The conical shape made the structure absorb less heat from the sun. And finally, the whole thing could be made out of readily available mud bricks. The key to life. Paul Davies, an astrobiologist at Arizona State University, believes we have ancient knowledge stored inside our DNA. According to him, the ancient knowledge was left inside of our bodies by extraterrestrial visitors to Earth in the distant past. Dr. Davies has suggested that we shouldn't just be scouring the heavens looking for signals from aliens. We should also be looking at our own genomes to see if there's a message there, one that extraterrestrials left behind after a visit. The theory is that when humans were still primitive monkeys, aliens visited the planet. They then messed around with our DNA, which led to our rapid evolution and streamlined advancement to the modern era. When they tinkered around with our DNA, Paul believes that they left a message for us to find when we became smart enough to see it. This sounds like science fiction, but it might just be true. A pair of scientists from Kazakhstan recently announced a shocking discovery in human DNA. They found what looks like an intelligent signal hiding inside the human genetic code. The code appears to have been intentionally seeded. The information is non-biological and looks like a math equation, but nobody has been able to translate it. Scientists are calling it the wow signal of the genetic code, referring to the mysterious radio signal detected by SETI in 1977. If true, it could mean the secrets of the universe are literally encoded in our own DNA. The geometry of Göbekli Tepe. Göbekli Tepe is an ancient temple complex in Turkey that was built by an unknown group of people 12,000 years ago. The site was built out of stones that weighed over 20 tons, at a time when human civilization was still in its infancy. The Ice Age still wasn't totally over yet, and most people were either nomads or living in caves. All the same, some group of unknown people created one of the most impressive temple complexes in the world. 20 stone circles and over 200 intricately carved pillars can be found here, many of them over 20 feet tall. The stone is also decorated with strange images of creatures that look like they're from another planet. But there have been some new developments, and it has to do with advanced geometry. Israeli archaeologists from Tel Aviv University recently announced the discovery of advanced hidden geometric patterns. The researchers were studying some of these stone enclosures when they came across equilateral triangles. This shows that the builders understood geometry at what must have been a modern level. Archaeologist Gil Hackley says the geometric precision proves the structures were all built simultaneously. The builders planned the structures beforehand, used math, standard measurement units, and geometric principles. This is an extremely shocking discovery. There is no way that Göbekli Tepe could have been made without first coming up with a floor plan for the structures. In other words, the people here needed to create a blueprint of what the complex would look like. That's something that wouldn't be done again for thousands of years later. These were people with wooden clubs and stone tools, and yet somehow they drew up advanced plans for a temple complex. It's shoutout time! Big thank you to Cassius Crazy and SP4 for supporting this channel. Click that subscribe button. Be sure to join the Origins Explained family. Flexible glass. Somehow, a very smart man in ancient Rome came up with something so brilliant, even the best inventors haven't been able to copy it to this day. There are 3 separate sources for the story, so there does appear to be some truth in it. One of the most reliable sources is Pliny the Elder, who wrote of the invention of flexible glass around the year 78 AD. As far as the legend goes, a glassmaker asked for an audience with Emperor Tiberius. He showed the emperor a glass drinking vessel and then threw it on the floor. But instead of breaking, the glass only dented. The glassmaker was then able to remove the dent with a hammer. He said his invention was a new kind of glass, as flexible as bronze, but transparent. The story goes on to say that Emperor Tiberius hated the invention so much that he had the glassmaker killed and his workshop destroyed. Tiberius was worried that flexible glass would destroy the value of the silver and gold he had stashed away. So the advanced glass-making technique was destroyed before it could ever be understood. And to this day, scientists have never been able to replicate it. The Osirion. There is an ancient megalithic structure in Abydos, Egypt called the Osirion. It can be found just behind the mortuary temple of Seti I, and yet the structure has nothing to do with the temple. Its purpose is unknown, and so is the identity of its builders. We don't even know when it was created. The mysterious structure appears to resemble a tomb from the Valley of the Kings, only on a much smaller scale. The site is broken down. It has been for years, but archaeologists can still tell what it used to look like. There was a large stone-paved island in the center, with chambers stretching on either side of it. The only way to enter the structure was through a stone passage, almost 300 feet long. In the entire country of Egypt, there isn't a single piece of architecture remotely similar. One of its most impressive features are the very blocks it was made out of. The Osirion has huge trilithons, meaning a pair of vertical stone posts with a third, smaller stone sitting horizontally on top. The most famous trilithons are in England at Stonehenge. These things typically aren't found in Egypt, making the place even stranger. As for who built the Osirion, many experts believe it was Amenemhet III in the 12th dynasty. This was the same king who allegedly built the labyrinth at Hawara. The labyrinth is a legendary structure that's never been found, a subterranean maze hidden underneath the pyramid of Hawara. Ancient historians say it was once filled with 3,000 rooms of secret knowledge. If the Osirion really is connected with the labyrinth at Hawara, its true purpose could be something out of this world. Whispering trees. Indigenous people all over the world have known for thousands of years that everything is interconnected. From the tallest tree to the smallest plant, the Norse believed in the tree of life, which they called Yggdrasil. In Mesoamerica, they called the ceiba tree the tree of life, with its roots going all the way down to the underworld. Even in the Christian Bible, there is a tree of life within the Garden of Eden. Egyptians also had their very own tree of life, called the Ished tree, from which the gods themselves were born. In ancient Assyria, people carved mysterious trees in stone that almost look like a DNA double helix. The earliest civilizations, and even the most popular world religions like Hinduism and Islam, understood the importance of the mystical tree of life. But did they really have secret knowledge of an unseen world, or was it all just symbology? The truth is that there does appear to be an ancient network spread across our planet. Scientists have confirmed that forests act as one giant superorganism, with fungal highways underground connecting the oldest trees to the youngest saplings. Even more, it appears that these trees and plants may communicate with other species in the forest. This should come as no surprise, considering plants have been evolving for 600 million years. Fungi and plants have a symbiotic relationship known as mycorrhiza. In 2019, scientists started a project to map the mycorrhizal fungi network. It's now looking like they've identified the most ancient social network on Earth, an interconnected web of plants all communicating with each other across the globe. Ptolemy's mysterious map. A mysterious map of Germania, put together by the ancient Greek scholar Ptolemy in the 2nd century AD, has been baffling scientists for years. Ptolemy lived in the city of Alexandria over 500 years after it was founded by Alexander the Great. He was an astronomer, geographer, and mathematician. He was also the very first person who created a map of the world with longitudinal and latitudinal lines. That was a pretty big deal 1,200 years ago. Most of the maps that Ptolemy created were based on older maps, writings from marine explorers, and other accounts of places in Asia and Africa. He also supposedly used a lot of information stored at the Great Library of Alexandria. Before it burned to the ground, this library was said to be one of the greatest repositories of knowledge in the world. Ptolemy also made maps of the universe. He made a lot of astronomical discoveries that even Isaac Newton admitted should have been impossible without the same instruments that he used. Then there is the mysterious Germania Magna. It's a map of Germany and the area west of the Rhine that Ptolemy had no business knowing about. This was a region of Europe that the Romans never managed to conquer. It wasn't until the medieval days that people really knew the area. And yet Ptolemy put together a detailed map complete with 94 settlements that nobody else knew about. We still don't know where he got his information. However, it does seem to suggest a much better understanding of the world by ancient people than we give them credit for. Advanced astronomy. The Babylonians had an extremely advanced knowledge of astronomy. One of the greatest achievements of Babylonian scientists was creating the calendar. Starting around the year 1800 BC, they tracked solar and lunar cycles to develop a highly advanced almanac that could be used by everyone to track the days, months, and important celestial events. The development went on for 600 years. The Babylonians mapped the constellations, creating the ones we know today like Capricorn and Gemini. It's crazy to imagine it, but we are still using the same astrological symbols as they did almost 4,000 years ago. They also used sophisticated arithmetic to calculate the months and dates. Only the Babylonians did it a little differently. They designated the first day of every month as the first day after the new moon. Even with the differences, we could still line up our modern calendars with the ancient ones from Babylon, and there would be very few differences. Roman mills. The Romans were some of the first truly practical people. While many of the more ancient civilizations had advanced knowledge of the cosmos, nature, and the human soul, the Romans craved knowledge of technology. They were all about efficiency, advanced engineering, and progress. One of the greatest examples of this are the Roman mills. Romans constructed mills for everything from agriculture to mining. The first was built around the 3rd century BC, simple operations used for grinding grain. But as the Romans pursued their thirst for knowledge, the mills got better. They soon developed milling machinery to crush ore at mines, decreasing the need for human labor. They implemented some of the first technologies that took away people's jobs. Yet at the same time, their mills increased productivity and boosted the Roman economy. One of the most impressive creations was the sawmill. This was a sophisticated machine powered by a water wheel and used to cut both wood and stone. A reciprocating saw could be hooked up to the machine, a constant supply of water made the wheels turn, and a simple rod and crank worked the saw. These began to be used around 250 AD in the city of Hierapolis in Turkey.
The aliens of Canyon Rock. Deep in the Colorado Plateau, artists were busy making portraits of their own roughly 9,000 years before Leonardo da Vinci was even born. There are thousands of Native American rock panels scattered throughout the Southwest. But the Barrier Canyon pictographs are believed to be the oldest, with most of them concentrated along what had once been raging rivers. Some of the pictographs were painted as recently as 5,000 years ago, and many of them are even older than that. But what makes these ancient pieces of art so shocking is that they seem to hold a hidden meaning. The artists drew giant humanoid shapes, creatures that kind of resembled humans, but not really. They appear to stand over 8 feet tall, and many of them don't have any arms or legs. But what they do have is massive eyes like oversized insects. Historians have debated with one another over what the Native Americans were trying to depict here for decades. Some experts believe these were fantasy images, painted on the walls for fun with no special meaning at all. Others think the paintings, which happen to be a dark, bloody red color, were created so they would remember the bug-eyed aliens who came down from the sky to give them knowledge. Visual artist David Susek calls them Utah's first expressionist painters. The most likely theory is that they were used for spiritual or religious purposes. Maybe the figures are supposed to represent gods of some kind. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The Last Supper. Dan Brown's novel The Da Vinci Code is a work of fiction and has never pretended to be anything else. Nonetheless, it sparked all kinds of crazy conspiracy theories about the relationship between Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene. In the novel, it's claimed that the figure sitting next to Jesus on his right-hand side in Leonardo da Vinci's painting The Last Supper is in fact Mary, not the disciple John. And even though the book is fiction, Dan Brown wasn't the first person to come up with these ideas. It made these theories more mainstream and inspired art historians and scientists to take a deeper look at the works of Leonardo. The Last Supper was created between 1495 and 1498 during the Italian High Renaissance. It's a depiction of Jesus Christ with his 12 disciples at the final dinner they shared before the betrayal and the crucifixion. Some say Leonardo tried to hide secret truths inside the artwork. One of the theories is that the long-haired disciple next to Jesus is in fact his wife, Mary, whom Jesus loved. There is another interesting aspect here, which is the seating arrangement. In the Last Supper, you'll notice the seating pattern at the table is 3-3-1-3-3. There are 2 groups of 3 disciples, then Jesus, then 2 more groups of 3. Some believe this to be evidence that Leonardo was pointing to Lamentations 3:31-33, which reads, "For no one is cast off from the Lord forever." This could refer to the fact that many scholars say Leonardo was a lover of men, and that he was trying to make a point that God loves everyone, no matter their personal preferences for a partner. Many people believe this painting to be full of hidden clues for all kinds of things. It's just a question of what did Leonardo da Vinci really mean or try to say, if he was trying to leave a secret message at all. The identity of Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper, the notorious murderer who stalked the streets of London in the late 1800s, may have been a painter. Researchers now believe the man's true identity could have been Walter Sickert, a British painter that was born in 1860. Walter began his career as an artist in London and turned 28 years old in 1888. The same year, Jack the Ripper wreaked havoc on the public. In 1907, one of the most gruesome paintings imaginable was discovered, signed by Walter Sickert. It was titled Jack the Ripper's Bedroom, and it was about as creepy as you can imagine. It's a dark canvas picture with a black silhouette and some strangely dim rays of light. It gives off a truly disturbing aura and is exactly what you might expect someone like Jack the Ripper to draw of himself. Of course, one painting isn't enough to put all the blame on Walter. It wasn't until Patricia Cornwell, an American novelist, began her own investigation that some real headway was made. The author reportedly spent millions of dollars investigating Walter's connection to the Ripper killings. She was able to connect the handwriting on Walter's paintings with the handwritten letters Jack the Ripper sent to the press. We can't confirm beyond a reasonable doubt that Walter was Jack the Ripper. However, the clues hidden in his paintings seem to point in that direction. The Miracle of the Snow. The Miracle of the Snow was painted by Pietro Perugino between 1472 and 1474. It's currently housed in the collection of Polesden Lacey, an estate in the remote countryside of England that's owned by the National Trust. The painting shows a miracle event that struck Rome in the year 352 AD. Snow mysteriously fell from the sky, blanketing the city of Rome on a hot summer day. It was an event that boggled people at the time, and yet nobody's sure it really happened. The legend of the August snowstorm began to spread in the 13th century, about 1,000 years after it supposedly happened. And now, each year on August 5th, the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore celebrates La Madonna della Neve, which translates to Our Lady of the Snow. The painting of the Mystery Miracle shows Jesus and Mary watching over the incident from inside a cloud. But behind them in the background are what appear to be strange objects shaped like silver discs. Many have dismissed the silver discs as storm clouds, but if you look closely enough, you can see that they don't really look like clouds. They resemble solid objects, like a whole host of disc-shaped spacecraft hovering in the sky above the miracle. Could it be that aliens had something to do with the miraculous snowfall that whitened Rome in the 4th century? Or did the artist really just make his clouds look suspiciously like UFOs? Unfortunately, since the artist is long gone, we may never know for sure.
It's shout-out time! Big thank you to Stacy Waghorn for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on new videos like these.
Ancient cave codes. An internet sleuth has recently made a discovery that's shocking the archaeological community. It also seems to be changing everything we know about the history of written language. Ancient cave paintings, prehistoric pieces of art left behind by our primitive ancestors, may contain secret codes. Apparently, mainstream archaeologists have totally overlooked these codes for centuries. The cave paintings come from all across Europe, and they've been dated to be between 40,000 and 15,000 years old. Oddly enough, they all have the same mysterious code hidden in their images. A series of dots can be found in Paleolithic pictures of mammoths, bull-like creatures, fish, and many other animals. The code looks simple enough. After all, it's just a sequence of dots or thin lines. But according to Ben Bacon, the internet sleuth, there is an obvious correlation here. Primitive people weren't just marking dots for fun. Ben believes these mysterious codes were humanity's first attempts at writing down information. They could already draw pictures of animals, with the world's first artists dating back tens of thousands of years. But it was around 40,000 years ago that they started filling their images with dots, the earliest code in the world. Researchers think these hidden codes may have been an early kind of calendar system. The primitive people might have been tracking the life cycles of particular animals. It also could have been an attempt to count a certain number of kills. Researchers can't say for sure though, since the code was only just discovered. Still, there are naysayers out there that believe the dots are nothing but a clever coincidence. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Facets of Liberty. Anthony Quinn starred in some very old movies, the most famous being Lawrence of Arabia. He died in June of 2001, 3 months before the devastating attacks on September 11th. But a shocking new claim says Anthony predicted the event much earlier in a painting that he completed in 1985. According to the late actor's art dealer, Stephen Hart, Anthony was a secret clairvoyant, meaning he had the uncanny ability of predicting things that would happen in the future. He had many visions thanks to his artwork. Hart says his most notorious painting is called Facets of Liberty, an oil canvas showing the Statue of Liberty overlapped with another, much more sinister-looking face. If you look closely, Hart says you can see the whiffs of smoke in the sky and the hint of planes falling toward the tower. Apparently, you can even make out firemen in the painting. During his life, Anthony Quinn never came out to say what he'd seen in his artwork, but Stephen Hart says that's just because he didn't like to speak about fortune-telling business, only occasionally mentioning the art of premonition and his visions. However, Anthony's widow Catherine did say he was afraid before his death. Just before he died, he supposedly said something very awful was about to happen. He said nobody could possibly understand the scale of what was to come. The Crucifixion of Christ. In 1350, a fresco of the Crucifixion of Christ was painted on the ceiling of the Visoki Dekani Monastery in Serbia. The construction for the monastery began around 1327 at the behest of King Stefan Diansky. Unfortunately, the artist behind the work is unknown. His name was never recorded anywhere, so there's nobody to point fingers at when it comes to these strange theories around this ancient piece of artwork. Out of all the important heritage sites in Serbia, this monastery and its frescoes have come under more scrutiny than any of the others. It's because the fresco appears to show alien visitors watching over the crucifixion of Christ. The suggestion here is that aliens were present at the time Jesus Christ was nailed to the cross. Above Jesus' head on the left and right are what appear to be speeding alien vessels. They look like spaceships with a small man inside of them hurtling through the sky. Most Serbian historians dismiss this as being nothing but the artist's depiction of the sun and the moon. They say whoever painted this wanted to display the heavenly bodies as containing people in order to show how they suffered with the death of Christ. Others say there is no mistaking the metallic-looking objects in the painting, and that they are definitely proof of spaceships. Which side are you on? Let me know in the comments. La Bella Principessa. Scientists say they have finally uncovered the mystery of the Mona Lisa smile. British researchers studied a recently discovered portrait created by Leonardo da Vinci called La Bella Principessa. They then compared the techniques used in the two pictures, finally coming to the conclusion that the effect of the Mona Lisa smile was intentional. Leonardo had done it before, somehow mastering what experts call the uncatchable smile. If you're not sure what's so mysterious about the Mona Lisa smile, it's the simple fact that you can't really tell if she's smiling. It's there when you look at it from one angle, but if you move your eyes too fast, the smile suddenly vanishes. She could be grinning one second, and the next she looks kind of sad. This effect was also applied to La Bella Principessa, a portrait of the illegitimate daughter of a duke in Milan. From some angles, the woman appears to be smiling, but from others, her smile fades completely. This portrait was created by Leonardo in 1495 and was recently discovered hiding in a private collection. Researchers confirmed the technique by using volunteers to look at the painting from various distances and angles. They soon realized that depending on the focus of the eye and the viewing distance, the smile changes dramatically. The consensus here is that Leonardo mastered the art of the secret smile, the very thing that has made the Mona Lisa such a priceless portrait. The Crouching Woman. Pablo Picasso, the groundbreaking artistic genius who lived between 1881 and 1973, left plenty of secret messages and hidden details in his paintings. Most recently, art historians used X-ray fluorescent imaging instruments to look at the secrets hidden in Picasso's artwork titled The Crouching Woman. This was a major piece of work from his Blue period, and it was completed in 1902. It shows a woman in a cloak crouching down, with the painting saturated in depressing blues, grays, and greens. Researchers were able to uncover subtle changes made by Picasso through the painting process. Not only that, but Picasso also used another painter's work to help finish his own. Picasso took another work of art, rotated it 90 degrees, and then used parts of it for his own composition while covering over the rest with the crouching woman. He apparently incorporated the lines of someone else's cliffs to create the woman's back. This shows amazing artistic skill as well as an obvious disregard for another's work. As of right now, nobody knows who the original artist was who Picasso painted over. The Mona Lisa undressed. Legend has it that Leonardo da Vinci produced an extremely rare version of the Mona Lisa in which she was completely nude. The legend is based on the copies of the Mona Lisa where later artists drew her without any clothes on. The first of many of these renditions was also supposedly painted by Salai, known as Gian Giacomo Caprotti da Oreno. He was one of Leonardo's most promising pupils, and he was only 10 years old when he moved into the painter's household as an assistant. Between 1490 and 1518, Salai watched Leonardo carefully and would have known all of his secrets. When he produced a naked version of the Mona Lisa after the original came out, it led to widespread controversy and rumor. But the controversy has never really ended. The work of art called the Mona Vana was likely created by Leonardo da Vinci prior to the Mona Lisa. It shows a mysterious woman in the nude in almost the exact same position as the Mona Lisa. Art historians at the Louvre in Paris recently completed extensive research to confirm the work was done by da Vinci. They weren't able to conclusively say that it was him 100%, but their results showed that it's highly probable. But here's the thing with the Mona Vana. It's not the Mona Lisa. It shows a different person, a woman with a rather strong bicep. Many believe the model Leonardo used for this particular painting was his young teenage boy apprentice, Salai, who historians say he was almost certainly having a romantic relationship with. As we can see, there was a lot more going on with the Mona Lisa than just a coy smile.
Fear of the Walking Dead. Anyone who has a deep-rooted fear of zombies would never make it a day in ancient Greece. The Greeks were unbelievably obsessed with the living dead, even though these are the very people who gave us some of the most logical minds and rational thinkers. They were all quite hysterically nonsensical when it came to zombies. And yes, we have evidence of it. Archaeologists have uncovered multiple instances of ancient Greeks burying people in such a way that they can never rise from the dead. They would weigh them down with rocks, pile their corpses with fragments of pottery, whatever they thought would work to keep the body pinned inside its tomb. The Greeks feared that if they didn't do this, certain dead individuals would rise from their grave and terrorize the living. Dr. Carrie Sulowski-Weaver from the University of Pittsburgh says the Greeks are an excellent example of an ancient culture that embraced the supernatural. They truly did believe that corpses could become reanimated, but they didn't think of zombies as roaming across the world in great hordes and wiping out civilization. Instead, zombies to the Greeks were agents of death. They were thought to slink through the shadows to prey on unsuspecting victims, usually as revenge for something that happened in life. Necrophobia, a fear of the dead, was very much present in ancient Greece. Naked at the gym. The ancient Greeks loved to hit the gym. In Athens, over 2,000 years ago, the people were just as enthusiastic about getting into shape as people are today, maybe even more so. But there was one thing about going to the gym in Greece back then that would not be politically correct these days. First of all, the gym wasn't always just about working out. According to Eric Chalene, who wrote a book on the history of gyms, the gym was a place for artists and the political. The enlightened Greek could go to the gym and discuss life, culture, and the gods with his fellow enlightened friends. While all this was going on, the men were completely naked. The word gymnasium translates to school for naked exercise. Yes, I'm serious. There wasn't anything weird about this to the Greeks. They had a special kind of admiration for the naked human body and preferred to practice sports and stay in shape without any clothes on. They were positively obsessed with the male form and would prance around in the nude with all their pals in open-air gymnasiums without a care in the world. But the free spirit of the Greeks would die with the Romans and be ripped apart by the Middle Ages. The Romans didn't believe it was good to obsess over the body or one's physical appearance. They also didn't like how the Greeks were so willing to satiate their physical desires. As Christianity took hold, by the Middle Ages, the body became a thing to be feared, a toxic thing used only for immoral pleasures. Even in modern days, we are a long way off from openly naked gyms like the Greeks. Heraclitus and the cow's dung. Heraclitus of Ephesus was a Greek philosopher in the 6th century BC. He was an arrogant man, allegedly an influence of both Plato and Aristotle, and was famous for presenting his best ideas in the form of riddles. Fun, right? But Heraclitus, as the years went on, became a little deranged and a little lost in his philosophy. He started to hate other people's company, then retreated into the mountains like a hermit. While living out his final days as a crazy old man in the mountains, Heraclitus began to suffer from a mysterious ailment. He suffered from an accumulation of fluid in the body. Unsure exactly how to treat it, he decided to cover himself completely in cow dung. The idea was that the heat from the dung would make the fluid inside his body evaporate. What Heraclitus didn't count on was that he would get trapped in the pile of dung as if he'd stepped into quicksand. Stuck, completely helpless, and up to his neck in cow dung, Heraclitus was then attacked by some stray dogs and killed. He tried to fix his own sickness and instead was eaten by dogs. It's important to note that this may not be historically accurate. Nobody can say for certain how the famous philosopher died. Some scholars say the whole story about him dying from fluid accumulation was an ironic twist on his teachings. Something about the death of the soul when it turns into water. Either way, ancient Greeks had some strange ideas about medicine and cow dung. Spartan training. Sparta was a Greek city-state. In ancient Greece, the country was made up of many individual city-states, none subservient to the other. Athens was its own city-state, and so was Sparta. But Sparta was vastly different from Athens. Whereas their Athenian neighbors were busying themselves with politics and philosophy, the Spartans were busy training warriors. It was thanks to the Battle of Thermopylae in 480 BC that the Persians never conquered Greece, and that battle was only a handful of Spartans against the vastly superior Persian army. Many of the Greek city-states had perfectly fine armies, but Sparta's army was recognized as being the best. They achieved this greatness because of their education and training systems. They used harsh and often cruel methods to prepare young Spartan boys to grow up to be good citizens and ruthless soldiers. It was called the agoge or the agoge, and it's hard to imagine 7-year-olds today going through such a violent and exhausting trial. Parents these days would see it as a traumatic and frightening experience, but it was what made Sparta great. According to the Greek historian Plutarch, Spartans began to develop their soldiers immediately after birth. Male infants would be evaluated by elders, and only those considered sturdy were allowed to live. The rest were deemed unfit to be Spartans and were left at the foot of a mountain to perish. At the age of 7, the boys were turned over to the state. It was like boot camp where the boys lived and trained together. They studied, fought each other, and the most skilled soon became captain and was able to give orders. Through their training and education, Spartan boys turned into men who could endure more than any other Greek. They were also dedicated to Sparta, and this upbringing resulted in one of the most stable political entities in world history. Sparta's politics never floundered because everyone grew up with a strict sense of community and cooperation. Sparta only fell when they were forced to join the rest of Greece after they got ganged up on in 192 BC. Well babies. Sadly, Spartans weren't the only ones in ancient Greece who threw away unwanted babies. In ancient Athens, it was totally normal for somebody to throw a human infant down a well if they died shortly after birth. Back then, it was seen as nothing more than throwing something away. It's pretty horrific, but the Greeks didn't see anything wrong with it. Evidence of this terrifying practice was discovered in the 1930s. Archaeologists excavated the Athenian Agora marketplace in the city center. They found all kinds of buried temples, fantastic statues, and a mysterious well carved into the rock. They were hoping to find more statues and relics at the bottom of the well, but instead came across 450 infant skeletons. At first, the experts couldn't fathom the idea of throwing away babies. They believed there had been some kind of mass sickness that wiped out hundreds of infants. It wasn't until later that researchers agreed the well had been a garbage dump for the recently deceased. The thing is that in Greek society, nobody was considered a real person until about 10 days after their birth, when they had a special ceremony. And so, if a baby died due to natural causes after being born, they were almost never buried properly or even grieved for. They would just be tossed down the local well or left at the dump. Sacrificed to Zeus. The ancient Greeks may have done a little more human sacrifice than previously believed. We know the Aztec, the Inca, and the Maya were all fans of sacrificial rituals, but it's not really something that turns up in Greek history. However, a recent discovery on Mount Lycaon is changing our whole perspective on Greek sacrifice. The cold remains of a male teenager were found at the mountaintop, a spot which we know was popular with worshippers of the god Zeus. It was at the top of this mountain where an ash altar was erected to Zeus, the god of gods. The altar was excavated in 2006, but no human remains were initially found. Those didn't come until much later. Now researchers are wondering just how many other sites in ancient Greece were used for the ritual killing of a person. It could be that the Greeks were a lot more bloodthirsty than anyone ever imagined. Flat stone toilet paper. If you've ever wondered what it was like living in ancient Greece, replace your toilet paper with a broken dish from your cupboard and you'll have your answer. According to French anthropologist Philippe Charlier's new study on toilet hygiene in the classical era, the Greeks used flat stones or pieces of ceramic to clean their bottoms. The theory is based on small discs found near ancient latrines with residue still stuck to them from thousands of years ago. There are also images on ancient Greek cups that appear to show people using such stones to wipe their behinds. This is quite different from what the Romans did with their public bathrooms. They used something called a tersorium, which was a sponge tied to a long stick. People would use it to clean themselves, with dozens of people all sharing the same stick. They would give it a brief rinse with vinegar water or salt water, then pass it on to their neighbor. The Greeks went in a totally different direction with their toilet etiquette. They used rocks to scrape away unwanted residue instead of a comfortable soft sponge. The mellified man. Soaking a human cadaver in honey was widely practiced in China in the 16th century. It's called mellification, and it was a way for old people to donate their body to science. The idea supposedly came from an Arabic recipe, a very old tradition in which a recently dead person would have their body transformed into medicine. The process was gruesome at best and involved turning a human body into a mummified candy bar. To make things even more gruesome, to yield the best results, the mellification process typically started while the individual was still alive. The person would eat nothing but honey as they reached their final days. They would even bathe in the honey, and before long, honey accumulated inside the body, and then the person died. After their death, they would be buried in a stone coffin filled to the brim with honey. The coffin was then closed for about 100 years. The honey would preserve the body and turn it into a sugary glob of confection. Then the mummified human candy apple was cut into pieces and sold at markets as medicine. People used this stuff to treat wounds, bone fractures, sicknesses, and even ate it as a treat. And although this was most popular in China in the 16th century, it started way before that in ancient Assyria, and it may have been practiced by the Greeks as well. The Greek historian Herodotus wrote of the practice in the 4th century BC. There were also rumors that Alexander the Great was buried in a honey-filled sarcophagus. Kicking out the politicians. If you didn't like a politician in ancient Greece, you could get together with your friends and vote to have them ostracized. Ancient Greek democracy was such a new and exciting thing that if the public hated a politician enough, they could have them banned from Greece forever. This was popular for a brief moment in time. From between 487 and 416 BC, Athenians were encouraged to banish whoever they wanted without a trial. It was the opposite of a popularity contest. And according to historian James Sickinger from Florida State University, its origins were completely humble. In order to prevent any tyrants from taking root in the democratic system, Greeks were given the power to kick out unwanted politicians. The historical records from ancient Greece show that it happened at least a dozen times. A candidate only needed roughly 6,000 votes cast against them. This was considered enough hate in Athenian democracy for a politician to be ostracized. The issue became that Athenians could not agree on anything. If even just a small group hated what one politician was doing, they could have that person kicked off the team. It became a major problem because after almost a century, nothing was getting done. Nobody could agree on what the right course was, and so ancient Greece had to change their system to something a little more like what we have today. Not worth his salt. Ancient Greece was not nearly as civilized as many people think. One major aspect of Greek society that nobody wants to talk about is the fact that they practiced slave trading. Slaves were a major part of Greek culture, just as they were with the Romans. It was perfectly acceptable in ancient Greece to purchase human beings from foreign states and treat them as livestock. Even more disturbing is just how the Greeks would pay for their slaves. One of the most popular payment methods was salt. Because salt was such a scarce commodity, it could be used for everything from paying a soldier for their work to purchasing another human being. The expression, "not worth his salt," came from ancient Greek slave markets when people refused to pay salt for an individual they viewed as undesirable. Thanks for watching! Do you think you could have survived in ancient Greece? The cold core. The red planet is our celestial neighbor, and yet it's incredibly different from our own world. It's frigid, with nighttime temperatures falling to minus 220 degrees Fahrenheit at the north and south poles. Mars is plagued by brutal dust storms that sweep across the surface. It's barren and devoid of life, and it's an inhospitable nightmare. But billions of years ago, Mars wasn't such a destitute place. It was warm, tropical, and maybe even brimming with life. Liquid water flowed across the surface. There were shimmering lakes, winding rivers, and all the similar geological features you can find on Earth today. But then, something happened to Mars. It lost its magnetic field. Without it, the sun burned away its atmosphere, dried up its water, and almost certainly killed whatever life had been thriving there. For decades, scientists have been trying to figure out why Mars lost its magnetic field. Now, researchers from the University of Tokyo have learned that the magnetosphere was likely destroyed when the core of the planet went from liquid to solid. That very same thing could happen to Earth. Earth's core is made of the inner core, solid iron, and the outer core, molten iron. 4.5 billion years ago, the entire core was molten. But since then, the planet has been cooling down. As the planet cools, the core gets less and less molten, and when the core completely solidifies in the future, the magnetic sphere protecting us from the sun's radiation will be destroyed, and we will all roast as our atmosphere is blasted away. The good news is that it won't happen anytime soon. Probably. The Great Flood. In 2021, Pope Francis warned the people of Earth that another great flood was coming, just like the one from the Bible. He said it's going to happen because of climate change. The Pope's dire warning has been repeated by scientists. Scientists who say it's only a matter of time before a biblical flood comes to wash away all of California. This apocalyptic event has been dubbed the Ark Storm scenario by researchers with the U.S. Geological Survey. New research published by the organization claims the flood is not a possibility, but an eventuality. It will happen. It's only a matter of when. The experts claim that when this great flood comes, California will be hit especially hard. Over 1 million people will be forced to flee their homes, while the entire coastal part of the state will be suddenly submerged under dozens of feet of water. Historically, California experiences major floods every 100 to 200 years. The last one happened in 1862. Thousands of people were killed, entire towns were washed away, and the state went bankrupt. It happened due to a series of atmospheric rivers, which are concentrations of moisture in the sky, like flying rivers that get dumped on a specific area. In 2021 and 2022, atmospheric rivers caused widespread damage across the Pacific Northwest. In Canada, the only road connecting British Columbia to the rest of the country was completely washed away. Scientists believe that in the years to come, more of these atmospheric rivers will wash away California. But of course, California won't be the only one to suffer when the Great Flood comes. All the coastal areas of the world will be flooded, which will cause millions upon millions of people to flee inland, creating massive chaos, anarchy, violence, and apocalyptic destruction. No more moon. There is a pretty high possibility that one day our moon will no longer be within our orbit, and if that happens, civilization will come to a screeching halt. Scientists say that our moon drifts about 1.5 inches away from us every single year, and each time that happens, our rotation slows down ever so slightly. If the moon drifts far enough away, there will be some dire consequences for our planet. The full moon is about 14,000 times brighter than anything else in the night sky. Without it, night would be utterly dark and terrifying. Then there are the tides to think about. Without the moon close by, our tides would be disrupted in a major way. They would shrink by about 75%, almost instantly killing and drying out marshes and mangroves and all the little critters that feed everybody. Crabs and mussels and worms that live in tidal zones would all die. This in turn would disrupt the diets of larger animals, which would send the entire global ecosystem into a death spiral. In a very short time, all natural life would decline, and there would be mass extinctions. Just think of all the animals that live by the coast. Another scary change would be the weather. The tides and currents mix cold water from the Arctic with warm water in the tropics to create a balanced and stabilized worldwide climate. Without the moon, the weather would be insane. It could be blistering hot one day like you were standing in the Kalahari Desert, then freezing cold like you're at the North Pole the next. It would cause global chaos, and humanity would almost certainly perish. The last selfies of the world. An artificial intelligence program called Midjourney was recently asked to create artwork from the end of the world. This program was what you might call an engine for imagination. You can ask the artificial intelligence to create artwork of anything, and the AI will then use its superior intelligence to craft totally unique pieces of art based on your parameters. One user decided to take things to the extreme. This person didn't ask it to create pictures of bunnies or rainbows. It asked the software to generate images of the last selfies taken on the last day on Earth. The results are utterly horrifying. The AI was able to reach deep into world history and the present state of human affairs and come up with terrifying, apocalyptic selfies. These generated images include humans in gas masks against a backdrop of smoke and fire, snapping selfies as the world burns. There is somebody standing at the edge of a great expanse while nuclear missiles can be seen firing off in the distance. Each and every photo is a gruesome glimpse into a possible apocalypse and the last surviving humans at the end of the world, documenting the fiery destruction of the planet. The pictures have got some wondering if the Midjourney AI managed to get a peek of what's coming. Artificial intelligence seems to think our imminent future is a world of nuclear strikes, cities on fire, and people still clinging to their phones, even as the end comes. If you knew the world was ending, what would you do with your remaining time? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. The zombie virus. According to National Geographic, rabies is the real-life zombie virus. Turns out there are viruses that can cause humans to turn into zombies. These viruses don't bring humans back to life, but they do turn them into mindless monsters that might feast on human flesh. Virologist Samita Andreansky with the University of Miami says rabies can drive people to become violently angry. But rabies has been around for a long time, right? It's not as if a rabies outbreak is going to turn the world into an apocalyptic nightmare, one with everyone frothing at the mouth and trying to kill each other. But unfortunately, that's something that really could happen. Researchers say that if rabies were to mix with a flu virus and mutate, we could have a zombie apocalypse on our hands. If the genetic code for rabies goes through enough changes or mutates with something like the common cold, incubation time and transmissibility could spike. This would produce a zombie virus totally airborne and as easy to catch as the common cold. Incubation could be about 5 days, at which point people would suddenly turn into bloodthirsty crazy people. If it spread across the globe, it would be the closest thing to a zombie apocalypse. Slime molds. Intelligent oozing slime has been around for at least 100 million years, since the Cretaceous period. Slime mold, as it's called, is really an intelligent, gigantic amoeba. It began branching off of the evolutionary tree long before animals ever split away from plants and fungi. They don't really fit into any group, while some live as individual cells and others live in massive colonies. One of the most famous of these slime molds is Physarum polycephalum, and it's incredibly smart. The mold is bright yellow and spreads out in large sweeps of veins and branches. Researcher Tanya Latty, who works out of her own laboratory in Australia, calls them little slimy aliens. There are about 900 species of them in the world, mostly in wet and temperate forests. But what does this have to do with the end of the world? Some people believe slime mold will inherit the earth. The mold can smell food using receptors all over its body. It can even move in the direction of food by growing toward it. Slime mold can put itself back together after it's been cut to pieces. This stuff is practically indestructible. There is a small but terrifying chance that one day the intelligence of the slime mold will grow so vast that it will begin to crawl its way across the globe. It will then consume everything in its path. Plants fight back. There is a possibility that one day plants will get sick and tired of human beings and release airborne toxins to rewire our brains. It's a long shot, but it could definitely happen. If this sounds like the plot of a movie, that's because it is. The Happening is M. Night Shyamalan's big picture about plants releasing toxins to force humanity into murdering itself. It is based very loosely on science. Dave Karen, a professor of biological sciences at the University of Southern California, says the science is totally plausible. Around the time the movie came out, Dave had been researching something called Pseudonytskia. This is an algae bloom that releases a substance which, when ingested by humans, can cause amnesia. If algae is able to cause amnesia in humans, it's fair to say plants could emit toxins to force them into fatal situations. Dave says the idea of an organism producing a substance which has a damaging effect on brain function is possible, right at the border of science and science fiction. One day, plants might start producing a new toxin as part of their pollination process. That new toxin could wipe out any humans who breathe it in. Death by fire. According to some scientists, the sun will destroy the planet a lot sooner than most people think. It's already an indisputable fact that one day our sun will destroy us. It happens to every planet in every galaxy. The sun at the center of the galaxy burns bright for billions of years. Then it betrays the solar system by dying and exploding like a cosmic hand grenade. The sun functions by burning hydrogen, transforming it into helium, all inside of its core. It burns through roughly 600 million tons of hydrogen per second, which is how it produces seemingly infinite energy. But as time goes on, the core of the sun becomes entrenched with helium. This causes the sun to shrink, speeding up its nuclear fusion reaction and pushing the sun closer to the day it dies and explodes. Most scientists agree the day that happens is a very long way off, another billion years at least. But according to astrophysicist Gillian Scudder from the University of Sussex, something else could happen even sooner that would devastate humanity. Gillian says that as the sun is saturated with helium, it produces more energy. Every billion years the sun burns hydrogen, it gets roughly 10% brighter. That means that as time wears on, the sun will continuously get brighter. Way before it ever runs out of hydrogen, the sun will become so bright and its energy so intense that it will burn the Earth to death. It will cause all the water on the planet to evaporate, sucking the moisture straight out of the atmosphere. The Big Mutation. 252 million years ago, there was a mutation that ended almost every life form on the planet. 2 genes were transferred from one kind of bacteria to an archaea, and it just about wiped everything out. As you may already know, 252 million years ago was the beginning of what's known as the Great Dying. It's also known as the Permian-Triassic extinction, and saw 90% of marine life and 70% of land life wiped out almost instantaneously. The cause of the massive extinction event was a disruption in the carbon cycle. A burst of carbon was released into the atmosphere, causing temperatures to soar to impossible heights, acidifying the ocean and collapsing every ecosystem on Earth. Through the years, there have been a lot of theories as to why this happened. Some blamed a meteorite, some said a volcano. But according to a new study led by geophysicist Daniel Rothman, there was rampant microbial growth. At the time of the extinction, the archaea called Methanosarcina gained 2 extra genes through mutation involving a bacteria. These new genes gave the microbe the ability to eat waste from the sea floor. As the microbes ate, they excreted methane gas. In a very short span of time, these mutated microbes filled the atmosphere with carbon, which resulted in the near destruction of the planet. Scientists also say there is nothing stopping such a mutation from happening again. The Battle of Armageddon. According to the Book of Revelation, the planet will be destroyed shortly after the last great battle. That's the Battle of Armageddon, which the Christian Bible prophesied will happen at the dead ruins of Tel Megiddo in Israel. It's in the plain outside this city where the gathering armies of good and evil will face off during the end of days. There are a lot of different interpretations to the events in the Book of Revelation. Some believe the Battle of Armageddon is symbolic, while others say it's quite literal. The word Armageddon translates to the plain of Megiddo, in reference to the city. This city was an ancient trading hub which linked Judea to Egypt in the west and Syria in the north. It's mentioned 12 times in the Old Testament and was considered a very important place in the Old World. It was so important that St. John believed it was where the final fight for humanity's salvation would be fought. For Jehovah's Witnesses, Armageddon is the day of reckoning. They believe that Armageddon is when God will finally fulfill his purpose to eradicate sin and death, populating the planet with happy and healthy humans. The Jehovah's Witnesses believe that on Armageddon, the army of heaven will come down to eliminate all the wicked humans, leaving only the righteous remaining. But whether this really is how the world will end, it's impossible to say. Thanks for watching. What do you think will happen at the end of the world? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you soon. Bye!